Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Faith Unraveled. We're super excited to get back to the show today after taking a month off. I couldn't talk for longer than 5 minutes without coughing. I cannot believe how long.
You've been sick for like 2 weeks, and then prior to you being sick, you went to Utah to visit our daughter.
Yeah,
So,
that was super fun. But we're so excited to get back to our topic around faith deconstruction. We know a lot of our audience is from the LDS faith deconstruction community, but we have a lot of other people from different denominations and different life situations that are deconstructing. And I'm excited to dive back in today. We are referencing a book today called Recovering Agency. It was a book that I started reading after about a year of deconstruction. And it really helped me understand like what happened to me. It's so hard to understand when you have a faith deconstruction or a faith crisis. Like when it happens quickly, it feels like a crisis. And the reason that it's a crisis is because you feel totally destabilized. You don't know where your anchor is. You feel like you're just totally thrown off track. You're not sure what your path is. It can be really complicated when you are maybe in a mixed faith situation, as a lot of our viewers are. So we're going to talk about one of the most important starting points, which is just identification, realizing what happened to you. There is a documentary right now on Netflix called The Program, and it was written and produced by a woman who was part of the troubled teen industry schooling. She was sent away for a couple of years to one of these schools. And the idea with these schools is that they would strip you of your identity and replace that with their own agenda, their own program. And I watched it this last week, and there was one thing that the woman said, which was that it took her quite a while into her adulthood, I want to say like 10 years, to even realize what had happened to her. Even though she knew she didn't like it, she knew it was bad and it was a horrible experience. But really, for that story to even form to where she could share it with the world, it took her a really long time to look back on her experience in the troubled teen industry and to see, wow, how that impacted her whole life, her whole development of identity. And I related so much to this film, even though I was never in a school like that, but because of my religious indoctrination in a high demand religion.
Yeah, the one topic that we're going to get into here is doctrine over self. So Luna Lindsay talks about this and how the church replaces its doctrine instead of your own identity. And if you don't conform to that doctrine, then you're almost an outsider within the church itself too. And so a lot of what we're going to talk today is just how the church replaced our identity for many years. Like I would say all 45 years that I was in the church, my identity started being conformed from a very young age through primary, through young men's, to my mission, to like getting married in the temple, to like building a family after that. All that was conformed based upon the road that the church had asked us to travel.
Right.
And we had to conform to that from a very young age. And if we didn't conform to that, there was repercussions
Absolutely.
around that, right? If you didn't conform when you were a youth and you did certain things that were against strength of the youth pamphlet, you'd be in the bishop's office talking to the bishop. If you were, as you gotten older, if you weren't aligned with the church standards, you probably wouldn't have fit within the congregation of the church, and you would have felt like an outsider looking in. And so there's a lot to this, and you have to then start unpacking that. And then you have to start rebuilding your identity after that.
Yes. And do you find that the more this is described, this concept of group identity, and when you have a high demand religion, you generally have this expectation of conformity to the group identity. And if you just happen to be born as someone who has naturally a lot of the features that exist in that group archetype, then you'll probably be fine. For me, I'm not afraid of public speaking. I enjoy being with people. I love education. I love domestic duties. I love cooking. I kind of just naturally fell into that. And so for me, it was not as much of a difficulty. It was not as much of a stretch as compared to when I talk to women who are like, I never would have had kids. I mean, that's a really difficult statement to come to terms with when you were raised in the church, that you might be a woman who wouldn't have chosen a family. You might have chosen.
Yeah. What's the doctrine around that? So the people
family
who are,
proclamation.
Yeah. Yeah. Multiply and replenish the earth.
Right.
We're told at a very young age that one of the main goals of us coming on this earth is to multiply and replenish the earth. So guess what happens? We get married at a very young age, and we have kids at a very young age. You had Maddie at the age of 20.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people might have not had kids at that young of an age.
Absolutely.
Without that doctrine that kind of guided us at that point in time. Right.
Yeah. So I think about those women who wouldn't have necessarily wanted to have kids, or maybe they would have wanted to have a child at 40 and not at 20. Maybe they would have gone to law school. Maybe they would have opened a store or been in community service or became a doctor, or, something like that. So for me personally, as a woman, I love to cook. I love the one-on-one with my kids. I always dreamed about becoming a mother. So for me, that description for a woman within that group identity was not far-fetched for me. It was easy. But for another woman who might not have wanted that, think of what that struggle would be like for her living in the church, creating this life that is simply to conform to the group identity and not at all who her true identity is at all.
Yeah. And I would say that it really starts at the young men's, young women's area, or age from 12 to 18.
That's when it really gets.
Yeah. I think when you're in primary, when you're younger than that, you don't necessarily, there is some group conformity. There's some group teachings. It's around the basic principles of Jesus Christ, and maybe some of the Mormon theology that's with that. But it really starts getting real when you get to be 12 to 18 years old. And we're Gen Xers. I was born in 1974, graduated from high school in 1993. We had a pamphlet that came out when I was in like 16 or 15 years old that was called The Strength of Youth Pamphlet. And it had specific things that we could not do as a youth. So for those who are not Mormons that are looking in, they probably didn't notice it as much to a certain extent, but there was certain rules that we had to follow. One rule was you couldn't have multiple earrings.
President Hinckley.
Yeah. So you had multiple earrings, right?
Yeah, but that was, I want to say in 2000 that he made he gave an address, and it was, I believe it was in the year 2000. And it specified that women only should have one piercing per ear, that they should not have a hair color that's not natural. And I think in that talk, he also talked about tattoos and how they did not, it wasn't
our body. So the doctrine behind that is our body's the temple, and we shouldn't be graffitiing the temple. That's kind of what we were taught as a kid. So
that's the message we received from a church's standpoint. Yeah. It's that they're looking for a group identity. Yeah. And when you see people who are LDS, like when I would tell people I was LDS, it was never a surprise, ever. Yeah. Like as an adult, maybe it was when I was a teenager because I didn't really conform. But as an adult, there's this very specific way. There's even a cadence in the speaking. And that's even another thing that you have to unpack. When you start to deconstruct Mormonism, you realize, oh, holy shit, even the way that I present myself is like so Mormon. And so again, if it's really congruent with kind of who you are naturally and who you would be naturally, maybe you're a very charismatic person, maybe you're a very charming person, maybe you love leadership, maybe you love public speaking. Well, you're going to fit delightfully into this group identity prescription. But what if you're not? I do have to push back. Yeah. And then I'm going to push back on something that you said. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
The other one I think is very important for people to hear with the Strength of Youth pamphlet is women, and how it tells women that they can't wear bikinis or shoulders. And so it automatically, and the doctrine there is your body's the temple again, right? They don't want you, or the other doctrine around that we were taught as men, that you wearing a bikini or something that's not on modest. Yeah, modesty is probably that it would distract the boys into thinking like in their mind about women. So it wasn't about the woman itself. It was about the man, and
it would
and
distract you from your eternal perspective.
Exactly. So again, that's another group thinking that align with that. You're going to push back, and I don't want to.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily a pushback, but I just made an observation as you were talking about primary, because you said that the prescription for that group identity really started strong when you were in the youth.
Yeah.
And for me, I would say that as a woman, my first experience with that was definitely in primary. And that's because as a young woman, but even before, it started in Mary Miss, which is something we had in the 80s. It was probably there in the 70s too, but the boys and girls go in different directions once they turn 11. So the boys go with the Blazers and the girls, the Mary Miss. And I think there were 2 years of it, right?
Yeah.
10 and 11. And then when you turn 12.
And then you do it again when you get in youth, you go to young women's and young men's.
Right. So you might have been going to your activities and thinking that everybody was doing like camping and starting fires and things like that and playing capture the flag. Well, that's not what we were doing as girls. What we were doing as girls was recipes.
Homemaking, right?
Homemaking.
Yeah.
From a very early age. There was a song on one of the...
I didn't even realize that.
There's a song. Oh gosh, I know our listeners probably don't love it when I sing, so I'll try to just do the words. But there's a song that goes, "When I grow up, I want to be a mother. One little, two little, three little babies of my own." And there is something about like... of all the roles in life, there is no other. Like, think about that. There's no other options. And that wasn't a primary song, but it was one that you could buy in like Deseret Bookstore. It was the one that started, "I'm a Mormon. Yes, I am."
You're right.
So if you want to study a Mormon, I'm a living specimen.
So to your point, I guess the word I was trying to use is tempted. Women tempted. By the way.
Tempted, yeah.
Yeah, tempted men.
And think about what tempted means. Tempted to think off course.
Yeah.
Like that's literally the temptation.
Right.
That your thought might not stay on the church's track.
Yeah.
You might deviate a little. That's the temptation that they're worried about.
Yeah, and that's the doctrine.
Crazy.
They want you to follow that doctrine to the very end, and they don't want you to be tempted.
Look how we look, think how we think,
dress
act
how we
act, right? Dress how we dress. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but going back to the homemaking, you're right. At a very young age in primary, you're taught not to look at a career, right? It's about being a mother. It's about being a homemaker. So you had that indoctrination from the very beginning part of primary. Like I remember singing songs about that in primary.
Now think about the missionary efforts overseas in countries that have a very rich indigenous culture, where these people have had their own probably spiritual beliefs. They've had their own heritage, their attire. It's all
tattoos,
connected.
If we go to the Polynesian culture,
right? Think about tattoos. Think about like the traditional dress, like for men might be like a sarong, or I'm probably using the wrong words here, but these are like incredibly beautiful and very central to these cultures' identities, personal identities. And what we would do as a church organization is we would go into these countries and we would teach these people, and we would use the missionaries as an example of how they would actually need to present themselves. White shirt, tie, pants, that kind of thing. And I know the church is becoming more open about incorporating these kinds
cultures.
Of things. You've got a lot of people from New Zealand who will wear the traditional
lava.
Right. So it's become a little more common for people to embrace that identity. And I think just like the social feedback, which is like, hey, we shouldn't really be stripping people of their identity. Really, truly, that is a bad thing to do. So there are people in the church that have opened this up and made it a little bit more progressive that way. But when we were growing up, it really was, they are going to take away your cultural identity, maybe even your indigenous identity, and we're going to replace it with all our shit.
Yeah. I remember being in Sweden and the saunas in Sweden, right? They normally go in naked in there. And so for them, nakedness isn't sexual. And we went to church in Sweden, right? And somehow this topic got brought up, and how that the church has had to come out and state, like, you cannot go in a sauna naked. But that's their culture. That's what they do.
Yeah. So we met a mission president that had gone into the Swedish stake, but he was like sent there from the US. Yeah. And the bishop there, who was native to Sweden, was like, come on over. We're going to go in the sauna. Yeah. And apparently they got dressed and they got ready to go into the sauna, which is basically that you're not wearing any clothes. Yeah. And he was like, no, we're going to have to, well, and I believe, that's not going to work.
Yeah. And I believe the church made a statement to the members. At least that's what I remember the discussion around. And so that's the indoctrination. That's them trying to pull them into
conformity.
The conformity of the doctrine to the church versus the culture versus yourself.
And I wouldn't even call the Swedes, the Scandinavian tradition of going in the sauna naked is more just like how we would not wear like a dress suit into the ocean. You would wear a bathing suit. And so it's not even, it's just like, why would you wear your, anyway. So, but yeah, that was a fun story.
Yeah. I would almost state that the conformity to the doctrine usurps any kind of factual information, science, and an example of that is we, in the church, and this is, and people are going to debate this, I know, is saying that the church or that people have been around for 6,000 years, 7,000 years, because every dispensation is 1,000 years from the point of Adam to Joseph Smith.
Right. The church believes that. Yeah.
So
that
anything
people have been around for 6,000 years.
Yeah. So anything that goes beyond 6,000 years, even though we have science, we have bones, we have DNA testing, they ignore all that science and say, nope, that was because when God built the earth, they built it with different parts of the world.
The gathering of the universe.
Brought it together. And the reason why you have like bones of people, because it's pulled it from different other planets or whatever, you can say
when matter was organized.
Exactly. So science doesn't matter. Like it's the doctrine that's important. And if you believe otherwise, then you're looking outside in, and it becomes very problematic with your thinking if you're thinking beyond that box.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we mentioned this initially, but a lot of the topics that we're going to be hitting on for this portion of the show come from Luna Lindsay Corbden's Recovering Agency. And when I referred to the documentary series called The Program that's on Netflix right now, the thing that really struck me was how long it took this filmmaker to conceptualize what had happened to her. And I feel like when you're deconstructing from high demand religion, it's no different. It's going to take a long time for you to understand why you feel so incredibly destabilized. And the book Recovering Agency, I've got it right here. We've got our little Post-it notes on some of the different topics, but literally this book is so dense and the topics are, each one of them is so incredibly relevant to the deconstruction process. So I definitely recommend
Mormon
this.
Mind control at the very beginning.
Yeah. Or lifting the veil of Mormon mind control.
And there's some truth to that. Like, I know that's going to be very hard for members to hear. So if anybody's a member,
but that's not really who the show is for.
Yeah, this is not who it is. Yeah, exactly.
If you're an active believer and the church is working great for you, like P.S. This show isn't like made for you.
Yeah.
This show is for people who are recovering their agency. So we couldn't have this series without talking about this book.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that topic about how members take it very offensive is also another like topic here in Luna Lindsay's recovering agency too. So.
Maybe next week we can talk about the thought stopping techniques.
Yeah.
Because you cannot believe the list that they have come up with, that Luna has come up with, talking about how to quickly change the member's mind to get them right back on track. The one that stands out to me is, will this problem affect you in the eternities? It's deferring to the next life so that you can easily just not deal with the problems in front of you. But there are like literally dozens of these kinds of thought-stopping phrases or cliches that are used in the church to get us back on track. But what I wanted to mention for today's episode, which is on Luna's chapter called Doctrine over Self. Is that right?
Yeah, it's Doctrine over Self.
Yeah, Doctrine over Self. And each of these are only a few pages long, but like I said, they're so dense and it's just got so much good information with lots of good analogies. What I wanted to mention is that there's no perfect resolution to this. And that's why we're putting out this podcast, because really just identifying it is the first step. But the problem is you're coming out of this system where all of the answers are very clear cut. It's very binary. Yeah. There's a solution for everything. The atonement is there for all the things. And if you will just repent and get back on the path, you've got this very easy solution. And as a human brain, our human brains love easy solutions like this. And when we're actually talking about the deconstruction process, it's not that easy. It's much more complex. There's no kind of one size fits all solution. And it can be really difficult when you are married and you've established your life under these pretenses. You've conformed, you've replaced your own identity with the church's prescribed group identity, and you've spent your life working to do that. And wow, does that feel incredibly destabilizing to learn that it was all a program.
Well, I think we shared this in the past, and if we didn't, I heard someone say it takes every 10 years you were in the church, it takes 1 year to deconstruct. So I was 45, you were 41, so it's 4 to 5 years. And I would say I just feel recently I've come out of that hole.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I'm probably able to talk about it, because I can now talk about it without so much emotion. Or if someone says something, I don't get so triggered that I'm coming after them real hard. I can talk about this from a place or viewing it at different angles, where in the past I was heavily in and it was totally destabilizing for a certain period of time during that 4 years.
And to me, this is the difference between, like, when people in the comments will say, this is the only religion I've ever seen where people have to make a whole identity on being ex-Mormon. Like, who else starts a whole podcast on deconstructing Mormonism? The reason for that is because in a religion that's not a high demand religion, they might not be necessarily telling them how they should dress, how they should act, how they should eat, how they should spend their money. That even the idea of being tempted is just thinking off of the program. Yeah. Like, everything is about, we are going to make you who you are, and that is so you can have salvation. That's why it's so difficult.
Yeah. Well, it's you lose your identity is the church.
Absolutely.
And as that goes away and you start like realizing that everything that you believed in and your identity was tied to that, it's all becomes false.
Yeah.
Then you have to relook at what pieces were you being indoctrinated in. You have to rip those pieces out. I think I talked about it's like peeling an onion. You peel one piece and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm back in here. I have to peel this off. I have to keep on peeling it. And then you peel your identity down to nothing. And that's when the true like realness comes about, because then you have to start rebuilding after that. You have to rebuild what your new identity is. So talking about this is the harm that we talk about the church does, is because it conforms you to their identity. You don't gain your own identity. You don't use your own inspiration. So number one, you have to start rebuilding that identity. And then you have to start like learning how to trust yourself, because you've always trusted someone else. Like you've always, like the church defaulted to the church and what they say. And so then you have to start like learning what it takes to operate in the unknown and walk in the unknown and start building in the unknown, which is a lot more different than having a full path in place for you.
I want to give one example of how this identity is created within the church and how your own identity is taken from you. One of the things that Dr. Stephen Hassan, who's a cult expert, who developed the 4 criteria for cult, sort of the criteria for something to be considered a cult. He talks about organizations that would give you a new name. Mm-hmm. And I immediately went to, like, when someone says the new name, what do you think of?
The temple new name that
you
you're
think
given.
of the temple new
Reuben.
name.
I was given Reuben.
I'm Leah.
Pleased to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. So just funny side note, every once in a while, Jamie and I will give each other the patriarchal grip and reintroduce ourselves as Leah and Reuben. It's kind of funny. But what I didn't really ever think about until reading this book by Luna Lindsay Corbden is that just calling you brother is like giving you a new name. So just think for a minute about new members joining the church and who they become. And if you're not familiar with Mormon culture, it's your name, brother, sister Smith, brother, sister, whatever. That is what you're called by, not just at church, but throughout the community. Yeah. That's the kind thing to do. But think about just even your name is changed, because when someone joins the church and they're suddenly Brother Roberts, they've never in their life been called Brother Roberts, but now they have this special identity that's tied in not just with the changes in their diet and the way that they spend their money, because now they pay 10% tithing, but now also even in the way that they're known to their community. They have this special name. They are now Brother Roberts, right? Yeah. And do you feel like, I didn't serve a mission, but on your mission, did you identify as elder?
Of course. I don't even know some of the first names of my companions.
And you're not even supposed to use their first name.
No, you're asked not to use their first name at all. I know a few of them, but not all of them. So
as I read through this chapter, I realize, man, that is why, excuse me, I'm going to drop an F-bomb here, but that's why I'm so fucked up. You realize when you start looking at this stuff, why you are so fucked up. Yeah. Because you were not allowed to develop your identity inside the church. So, like, who would you have been? And so now what does that process look like? How do you start to rebuild that as a almost 50-year-old man?
I think even before we get to how do you rebuild when you're 50 years old is talking about, like, it removes choices from you. Like, you followed a specific path. Mm-hmm. At one point in time, you wanted to be a lawyer. Mm-hmm. But what was more important in the church at the time frame was being a mother. And so at the age of 20, we had Madeline. So those choices for me, normally at the age of 19, I have friends who went off to college and started their career, where I went on a mission for 2 years. Not saying the mission's bad. I did we served others. It was a good experience, but that wouldn't have been my path. That choice wouldn't have been my choice if I didn't have the church. I would have walked a very different path at a very earlier time. Would I have gotten married? We've talked about this. Most likely we wouldn't have gotten married at 18 and 22, right? And so you have to come to a realization, what does that mean? Like, losing those types of choices, you most likely we wouldn't have had kids. We're now totally grateful. We don't regret it. We look back on it and we're very happy with the path that we have taken. But a lot of our life decisions were pulled away from us. And so that's the harm that it does as you deconstruct and you realize, hey, I would have walked a very different path being outside the church, and all these decisions that were made was because of the church, and it was false. And so you made all these decisions based upon that false pretense. And so guess what? Now you have to deal with that identity.
Here's a really difficult thing to conceptualize too, that took me kind of a long time to realize. When you're 20 and you're married and you are having your first child and you have very few resources monetarily, you're forced to pay your tithing. In some cases, you're going to be putting your groceries on credit cards so that you can pay your 10% tithing. And you believe that to live righteously, you're thinking, will this be important in the eternities? No, we're just going to follow the prophet. And so you see these young families that are struggling so much with 1, 2, 3 kids, single income, because mom's priority is being at home. That poor dad, there's so few jobs that can support an entire family on especially now, single person's wage. Okay. Now think about this. And who does all of that benefit? Why is that the prescription? Because that's
church.
What's going to get people locked into the church.
Tithing, yeah.
It's the statistics show the earlier people get locked into this, the more likely they are to continue. The church reiterates this study over and over again. You're going to be more likely to have generations of tithing payers when a boy goes on a mission.
Yeah. No, and goes into the temple and gets married in the temple.
And so
right?
all this struggle, all this heartache is for the church's benefit.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to really conceptualize when it's you that were the collateral damage.
Yeah.
And like you said, for us, it's worked out great. We were super lucky that I had, my parents helped me with my college tuition. We took out loans. We just got lucky. I think you said it the other day. You're like, we just got lucky.
It's not an easy path. Like most of my friends would have, they didn't get married at the age of 22 like I did. Most of them got married like late 20s, early 30s. They were well into their career. They were building their own self at that period of time, while we had 3 kids by then, or 2 kids. The third one came a little bit later.
And now we're having tons of fun.
Yeah.
So there is a flip side to this.
That's true.
There's so much fun to be had.
Because we have most of our kids out of the house.
Yeah, your life is not over when you're 40. But we call it the post-Mormon glow up. There just happens to be this thing that happens where people just have this new light after leaving the church. It's going to take a few years maybe to get through this initial deconstruction process. But this is the deconstruction. Looking at how the church replaced your identity with their own, just unpacking that, acknowledging it, just looking at it, just seeing it for what it is going to be incredibly healing. Having someone to talk to, get into the Mormon Stories podcast community or the Faith Journey meetups group on Facebook. There's live meetups. There's the Thrive group. There's the Mormon Stories meetup groups. The Lost and Found Club is incredible. Getting with people that you can talk about these things with, especially in the Faith Journey meetups group, which is associated with the Lost and Found group. It's for women and genderqueer individuals. And it just is an opportunity to unpack this stuff, because that's number one. But the second thing is self-discovery. So where does that begin for you?
Yeah.
Or where did that begin?
Where did that begin for me?
What activities or conversations or what modalities were useful?
That's a really good question. Part of my self-discovery at the very beginning, and I think I wasn't ready for it until like I was getting into the 3rd year of my faith crisis. I think the first year you're just trying to figure out like, where did I make a mistake? Like how did I get indoctrinated so bad? Where did I not see this stuff? And then once you get outside of like trying to understand the why behind it, then you start saying, oh my goodness, like who am I at this point in time? And as you're trying to figure out like who you are, and this honestly it took me 2 years to get to like, who am I? I had to go back in my mind and remember, oh, this is what I enjoyed when I was in high school.
You have to go back to childhood.
Yeah, I love dancing. I love having fun. I love experiencing life. What do I love about experiencing life? Well, that's the reason why we do music festivals because I enjoy going out.
You have a rowdy soul.
I do. I think I think I'm a little bit of a wild man inside. And so that's where also I never felt like I really fit into the church. We've had many conversations where I was like, Alicia, I just don't feel like I fit in. Like it's hard. And you were like, you better. I felt very judged by sharing that with you at that period of time, partially because my soul did not conform with that path of the church. Did I still play in that path? Yes, because I felt like a natural man's an enemy of God, and you're just allowing your natural man. So that's the doctrine behind that, right? So as I ripped down that doctrine and said, "Oh my goodness, this is all," I'm allowing my wild man to come out a bit. But then you have to watch it too, because then you could swing the pendulum in a certain direction that might harm, the family that you built for 20 years, or might harm myself, like doing stupid things that might like get myself into trouble. Like as everything destabilizes, it's easy to start swinging the pendulum because you're trying to figure out what's the boundaries now in your life.
Yeah.
So
one thing that really resonated with what you just said for me is that you were afraid to let the wild man come out because you're worried that wild man is going to kind of take over.
Yeah.
And you don't want to ruin these beautiful things that you've built because you've got like this rebellious part of your soul that wants to come out. And what I would say is probably one of the most important things for me during the self-discovery process was the idea of integration. And it's just this notion that you are multidimensional and there's so many different aspects of your personality that can exist together. You can make room for the rowdy child and the bookworm and the intellectualizer and the emotional child. And you're actually making room for all of these things to exist. Yes. But how hard is that to get when you've had such a binary mindset that you can only be one way? And anything that pushes up against that is wrong.
What's interesting, I was calling it the wild man, the rebellious child. It's not wild or rebellious at all. It's wild and rebellious in the church. But outside of the church, it's just experiencing life, having fun, experiencing joy, peace.
Yes. And that's why I say I really do think that a lot of these complexities are significant for high demand religion and maybe not other religions, because like, think of how many people on that Latin boat cruise that we went to this weekend were probably Catholic. Most likely. It was a Latin boat cruise that we went to.
I would sure. 70% of the people in there were probably born Catholic at one point in time.
Exactly. And they are proud of their Catholicism.
They are.
And they're there dancing and singing and having a beautiful time and just...
But there's no room for that in the church.
But there's no room for that in our church.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can't speak for Catholics, but I just think that there are other religions where there's much more acceptance for diversity, much more acceptance for a thought process that might not be exactly like the Pope's. I mean, even in Catholicism right now, there's people who are more conservative than the Pope and they don't like the way he's steering the ship. But there seems to be room for discussion. Within Judaism, there's so much room for dissent. I mean, you'll see rabbis who are discussing things that are coming from different places. And within a high demand religion, that's really what differentiates us, I think, in one way, is that we don't have room for dissension.
Yeah, and that's where the cult terminology comes around to, because there's not room for dissension, and because as you step away, you are pretty much shunned. If someone in Catholicism only goes to church Christmas and Easter,
they're still Catholic.
They're still Catholic. They still fit in that community.
And nobody in their community is wondering, wow, what the hell happened to Sister Rodriguez? She just has not been coming regularly, and I'm going to give her a speaking to. Now, and there's even a name for that in the church. You know what it's called? Calling them to repentance. Yeah. I was at a meeting. It was for a stake project that I was doing, and one of the gals that was there said, I just saw so-and-so. I won't say her name, but I just saw so-and-so. I called her to repentance because I haven't seen her at church in a couple months.
Well, let's just, if you guys want to see this, like go into the comments. We have 15, 16 videos. Just go into the comments and look at some of the Mormons who are coming into the comments.
Lurking.
Well, and I think there is a few people that called us to repent and say, I'm calling you guys to repentance. You need to change this. If you don't change this, you're not going to get to.
And it's not because they're assholes.
No, it's because
not.
They're indoctrinated.
They believe they're doing the best thing that they can do for you. The most Christ-like thing that they can do is to call you to repentance.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing. I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's a true statement.
So some other things around the self-discovery process that I wanted to cover before the close of this episode is I wanted to talk about just what are some of the modalities.
Self-care.
So you talked about going back and thinking about what did I love to do as a child? And I think that is huge, just making a list of it and going and exploring those things.
Yeah.
And if you're married, getting your partner involved with this process can be beautiful.
If it's mixed faith, it might be very difficult.
It can be difficult, but think of all the things that might be on that list that you didn't do as a kid that wouldn't necessarily be that an active Levy member wouldn't necessarily be opposed to. There might be some things there. Exploring nature, getting more into like visiting certain sites.
Meditation. Like, I don't know. Meditation is this weird like line for the church. I don't know. Because they might say prayer is meditation.
I would have considered my prayer my daily meditation, but
that is so triggering for me. I don't know if I could get to
Can
prayer
I just say though,
Yeah.
I think the reason that I was so destabilized in the beginning is because my prayer really was an important like pillar of my day, and now I need to get into a better practice of meditation because I think that just organizing my thoughts with prayer, and there's like the Mormon way to pray is that you start with gratitude, and it's actually a really nice structure for getting kind of your day and your life lined up. Your every day, starting your day by focusing on what needs to be first of all, what I'm grateful for, what I've been, blessed with, quote, and then figuring out like who in my world needs me today and how can I be a gift to the people in my family and how can I serve and and for me, that was helpful.
Yeah.
It was a helpful modality. The same practice can take place through meditation, although there's a different focus because with prayer, the focus is always getting you back into that Mormon mindset. Where with meditation, you're allowing these thoughts and emotions that might become clutter through your day, and you're just allowing them to breeze through like clouds.
Meditation has helped me identify my emotions versus my thoughts. And then knowing that they're two separate things, but one can influence the other. And so just being able to allow that and understand what those two are, I think is huge. I don't think you could have doing prayer. You don't get that. At least for me, I don't get that. I don't know if others get that. The other thing, like you said, is like hiking became very important to me. Nature became very important to me. I would love to understand what were some of your things. Like, how did you have to rebuild your identity? Alicia is a very intellectual person. I'm a very emotional person. My emotions come out a lot. And my journey probably through my emotions than my intellect. Her journey comes out through her intellect. If you look at her TikTok, it's really, really well done.
I think that I also just understanding through this deconstruction process that I am neurodivergent. And so I hyperfixate. So a lot of these businesses that I've started throughout the years of like blogging and doing my coaching community and talking about food and nutrition, and now the faith deconstruction stuff, these are all kind of the fruits of my hyperfixations.
Yeah.
And so that was important. And I overpathologize everything. Everybody's got a diagnosis in my brain. I can't help it. But these are all, I guess, part of my journey outside of the church is just kind of recognizing that that's like who I am. And I love social media for that reason. I know you can get like stuck in the doom scroll, the death scroll, but like there is so much more awareness now because of autistic people speaking about their life experience and ADHD people speaking about their life experience and so many wonderful therapists and teachers and people talking about their life experiences like online. And so that was kind of a fun element to me, but you do have to be careful because if you're deconstructing and feeling hopeless, doing the endless scroll on social media can be, it can harm you if you're not careful with it. But I will say that was a part of my exploration process. Hashtag ex-Mormon, like just looking at all those ex-Mormon posts and seeing where people are at. And yeah, that was all big for me.
What were some of the more important, like you said, socials and like watching different creators or influencers, or whatever you want to call them out there. But what's some other things that was very important for you to build your identity back?
Having fun was definitely part of that. And I'm grateful that I have you because I do kind of get stuck in my own thoughts a lot. And I've realized that going out and like listening to music and dancing and just having fun. So joy and pleasure, like it's like joy's okay in the church, but not pleasure, but like actually digging into like my sexuality. And even though I'm still identify as cisgender heterosexual woman, I do feel like I feel like it has been not that I've had to, but it has been a benefit to me to explore my sexuality as a woman and then to share that with you. And it's been a really neat part of building our relationship. So being okay with like having a sex drive, being okay with like allowing that sexual being to like exist as one component of who I am. Because again, we have many dimensions to our personality, and being a sexual woman is not something that's acceptable inside the church. And now I feel like it's not a huge part of who I am, but it's a part of who I am.
Yeah, it's a piece of you.
It's a piece of me.
Yeah.
And how often have you heard church leaders say, well, we don't like to call people homosexual because it's not who you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, it actually kind of is. Like the way that
it actually is, not kind of. It actually is.
It actually is who you are.
Yeah.
Like it's a component of who you are. Of course, it's not all of it. But yeah, that's a valid component of who you are, your sexuality. Yeah. Absolutely. And so I think owning that has been so helpful. And
do you feel like you have regrets about the choices that you didn't make?
Okay. Well, this is a really good game to play. It's just a thought experiment. Would there be anything that I would change? And every time I go through this, because I think to myself, my first year of college, I was English literature major. My plan was pre-law. I thought that was the path I was going to go on, follow my dad's career path into like corporate law. And then I got pregnant.
By the way, she would have been really good at corporate law.
I don't know about that. I think I might have hated it, but I love what I'm doing right now. So now I look at my life, and is there anything in my life that I would want to change? Maybe my house would be more organized. But like, besides that, like, I wouldn't want to change anything in my life. And so even though I know I would have made different decisions, I wouldn't go back now and change anything.
But that's now, like that's you thinking now.
That's now.
But as you went into the rabbit hole and was at the lowest point, did you feel conflicted that you didn't make decisions at all?
Not as much as other people that I've seen.
Yeah.
This is the most difficult for people who their identity really differs from the church's identity.
Yeah.
That's who this is really tough for.
Yeah, this is the harm.
Yeah.
That comes in, and we've seen it really eat some people alive in this because not being able to make those decisions and making them based upon a false pretense is
Think
difficult.
about the number of church employees
Oh yeah.
that have a faith crisis.
Yeah.
Like, just think about that reality. That's
Yeah.
the reality for so many people. And they've reached out. So many have reached out to me because I was preparing to teach seminary when I had I was preparing to become a seminary teacher. I hadn't even taken the calling yet, but I had talked to my stake president about it, really wanted to do it as my dream calling, and then had the faith crisis before it happened. I had thought, oh, that would be amazing. What a dream job to be a CES employee. I mean, that would have been like my dream.
Yeah.
And when I look at those individuals now and how difficult this process has been, like they had to restart their career.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's hard. That's
That's
hard.
so hard. So that's why I said in the beginning, like, this conversation is meant to be healing. It's not meant to give a prescription. There isn't really a way to just fix this.
It's because everybody's journey is different too. And all the life choices that they made is different. Like my life choices is different than your life choices at times. And similar to friends and family members that have gone through this, we've seen it be very difficult. One other thing I think that was very important to me is my own spirituality and building that identity was building, and I hated the term spirituality. I think I said this, like when I thought of spirituality, I thought of it as sitting on a pew, on a bench, looking up at the bishops, like dictating down, like any type of pastor. I cannot like be in that modality at all.
Well, and think about it this way too. Spirituality within Mormonism has a lot to do with who's watching you.
Yeah.
You believe from the time that you are a little tiny child that there's spirits everywhere.
Yeah.
That Heavenly Father can see and know exactly
Everything
what you're doing at every single moment in time. And that Jesus knows you.
Yeah.
He knows you. Yeah. And that's what spirituality is within Mormonism.
Yeah.
And outside of the church, I wouldn't even use the same. It's like the word spirituality really it's not the same at all.
It's not. Spirituality
for me now is about, I've said it before, it's just being mindful. Yeah.
Yes. That's where I've come to. Spirituality for me is mindfulness. It's grounding. It's understanding energy and connections of others. And I think I shared this, and if I didn't, there's 3 value systems that as I was rebuilding my identity, the 3 value systems that came very important to me was 1, do no harm. Like if there is consciousness beyond this life, I do not want to harm people. Even if there is no consciousness, I don't feel like harming. That's not like, I rather bring a positive vibe to this life. The second is experiencing life, because I feel like I didn't get to experience life in those 45 years. I felt like the church always constrained me in the box, that wild man. I was never able to like step outside and smell the fresh air and do things that did not conform to the church. An example would be Burning Man. Like Burning Man has been something I've wanted to do since I was in my high school years.
And
in
for
the
those
90s.
Who aren't familiar, it's a festival.
It's a festival that's in
It's an art
Nevada,
festival.
Nevada.
They've got like music artists and they've got,
And because I live in California, this, like, I guess I've known about this. I don't know how well other people's known about this in the 90s. It was at the time, it was smaller. Now it's like 100,000 people and huge, but that's been always something that I've wanted to do. And part of that is just the spiritual aspect of Burning Man. But so those are some of the things that were very important to me that I wasn't able to do, that now like I can experience that and enjoy that. So experiencing life. And the third one is connections with people, connections with you. Like I feel since we've gone on this journey, we become more deeper connected than we've ever had in our life, right? Same with our kids, like, and I think we shared, like, our kids, my daughter has noticed like a change, and she's like, I miss the old parents that I had, not because it's bad.
She misses the order.
Well, but it's how much we've transitioned too and changed. The way that we communicate with her, the way that we like embrace her is very different than what we've been or done in the past. Same with our other kids. And then the other thing is connecting with people, friends, and just people in general. It's just something that I really enjoy because I'm an emotional person, and I feel people on an emotional level. I really enjoy that a lot. And that's the reason why, like, I do the Latin boat cruise or the music festivals or just going out and having fun with people. I enjoy that connection. So
I love that. So I would say probably my biggest encouragement to people that are starting this process is read, connect.
Yeah.
So whether you're connecting through storytelling with other people, with other individuals, maybe there's someone on the internet, maybe you have one person in real life that you can connect with, have like a monthly meetup with where you just talk. Maybe you've got a therapist, but connecting through reading is another big thing for me. I listened to this book and I also have a hard copy. So Recovering Agency, Lifting the Veil of Mormon Mind Control. I'll put a link to this.
Well, we'll take a couple more topics in there. We just talked about doctrine over self.
Yeah,
There's 5 or 6 topics that I think
Just
would be really good for
just this one little, like, what is it, like 6 pages of on doctrine over self. I mean, it also talks about like decision making, and I just had someone from the community reach out and say, I knew I was gay, but I knew the right decision was to go on a mission. And that is such a consistent theme throughout the church. When people take who they are and they bypass who they are with the church's application. And so serving a mission instead of going to college and dating and exploring your sexuality that way. And don't ever let someone tell you that your sexuality is not a big part of who you are. I think that is, I think it's crazy. I mean, not for someone who identifies as asexual. There are people that identify as asexual, but even that is part of their identity.
Yeah.
Like, who you are as a person involves who you are sexually.
Yeah.
And
it's one piece. Like
it's
we
one
said.
piece. Yeah. But to take that one piece and to say, go on a mission.
Yeah.
It's like, and the patriarchal blessing does that too, right? So another modality of the church to get you to do certain things and put aside your own agenda for ours. It's dangerous. I think it's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, and that's why the faith deconstruction and rebuilding is so hard, is because you haven't made those choices. You don't trust yourself. And it becomes very difficult for people during that period of time. And hopefully this helps people out as they navigate through it, because it's not an easy journey. It's really hard. It's lonely at times. And if you have significant others that are not in the same place, it could be even harder, because then you feel even more alone.
So true. Yeah, so true. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Again, Luna Lindsay's Recovering Agency, Lifting the Veil of Mormon Mind Control. Their book can be found on Amazon. You can also get their book on Audible. And it's so much dense, fabulous information that's going to help so much with your deconstruction. I actually recommend doing both. So we'll put the link to both of those resources down in the comments. And please tell us what this process has been like for you. We love reading your comments. Absolutely love it. We hope to get onto a more consistent schedule now after being out for a month.
We're about ready to hit summer, and we have a couple vacations. So you're going to probably see it spotty from June, July, and maybe August it goes back to.
But we're really hoping for this to be something that will just stay on YouTube and something that people can refer to, and hopefully it'll be a helpful component to your deconstruction process. Someone had also mentioned doing an episode that their believing spouse could listen to. I think that I've been a little harsh in some of our episodes about the church. So maybe let us know if that's something that you'd be interested in.
We've also talked about bringing in our non-member neighbor,
our never Mormon neighbors,
and them sharing how different we are between where we were in the past to now.
Well, seeing it from their perspective is so interesting when they tell us stories like their kids would come over on Sunday and we're like, our kids don't play outside on Sunday, or like, we don't allow you to say, oh my God, in the house. Just so many different, they're so sweet about it, but it is interesting to hear from their like never ever Mormon perspective.
And they're the ones that offered that, hey, we should come on your podcast.
They're so awesome. So that would be a fun episode.
Yeah.
So, but we are going to continue on a couple more topics within this book. So please join us next time and let us know what you thought in the comments. And as always, if you would like to send a question or a recommendation for an episode topic, you can reach out to us on Instagram at faith.unraveled. I check my DMs almost every day. So hope you guys are having a great week so far, and we'll see you later.